Hey everybody, it's 2021 and we're still here. It's a Something in the Air podcast brought to you by the Press of Atlantic City. Join with me, as we do at the beginning of every month, is New Jersey State Climatologist Dr. Dave Robinson for our December monthly roundup. Dr. Robinson, I feel like I just saw you.
That's because you did.
Yeah, we did. We did the top 10 weather events of 2020. You can check that out in your feed or on our YouTube channel, on our website. We wanted to do the top 10 before the year ended. I don't think we had anything top 10 between December 29th and December 31st. You can correct me if I'm wrong, though.
No, we did not. But the list from the State Climate Office is now posted on njclimate.org, so you can see it there.
Yeah.
Even before we post, we're going to be posting the December and a shorter annual summary. But first, we thought we'd give everybody a couple days to look at the top 10. It will still be there, but it may be hidden behind the December report.
Understood. And there was a little bit of, I don't want to say South Jersey love. You gave some South Jersey credit. We had the tornadoes that we had. We had Faye on there as well, both of which were centered around the southern part of the state.
Absolutely. I'm an equal opportunity state climatologist.
Okay. All right. I didn't know if you got around with your other state climatologist buddies and be like, oh, there's only certain parts of the state we like. Is there that, I don't know, is there a Florida state climatologist who only focuses on South Florida? Because that's like the,
no, actually, they're at Florida State up in Tallahassee. So the New York State climatologist likes to focus on the Finger Lakes because he's up at Cornell.
Okay. So there is a little bias, is what you're saying. You're saying there's a little bit of bias.
Not in New Jersey. We're too small that we can't afford to have biases.
Okay.
We're too small.
All right. So we have the top 10 weather events list. He did his top 10. I did my top 10 on there. There's a pretty good time. You can check that out again in our feed. But we are going to talk about December here. And I think the first thing that comes to most people's minds in December is that we had some snow, depending on where you are. So, obviously, like you said, you're an equal opportunity state climatologist. But in our corner of the state, so we're talking about Manahawkin down to Cape May, out to Cumberland County, Western Atlantic. Well, yeah, Hamilton saw some accumulating snow. Bridgeton saw some accumulating snow. That's something we didn't see a lot of this year. Now, for me, you can see behind me right here in beautiful Pleasantville, New Jersey, we had not a flake from that storm in the middle of the month. But tell us about what happened on December 16th to the 17th.
Yeah, there's no equal opportunity there when it comes to snow.
Just a little bit.
Based on that one storm, essentially, South Jersey averaged 1.4 inches of snow for December. That's 2.1 below average. But of course, as you mentioned, most of that snow was to the southwestern part of the state on the afternoon of the 16th. Meanwhile, the northern third of the state averaged 10 inches for the month, and Central Jersey about 6. But that was an all-encompassing classic kind of storm. It was a nor'easter. The low pressure system was just off the coast. It was too close to us, as you can explain and did explain meteorologically, to give the state a snowstorm like we saw on December 26th, 2010, when eastern New Jersey got the heavy snow and West Jersey was a ways away from the precipitation maximum. So everybody got snow, but they got much, much less than along the coast. This storm was too close to the coast, so it brought in a lot of warmth off the ocean. There was also northeasterly winds rather than northerly winds, bringing colder air in from the north.
Yeah.
So the coastal areas Linwood had over 3 inches of rain, as did Stafford Township as well. So the most precipitation fell along your coastal south region, but the most snow fell and in the 1 to 1.5, 14-inch range was up in the highlands and the higher elevations of the Northwest. But on top of that, we had there was some wind with that storm. And along came the storm on the 24th and 25th.
Yeah.
Which had its own little take, so which one had the river flooding, which one had the coastal flooding, which one had the snow, which one, it was really two back-to-back powerhouse storms.
Yeah, it wasn't a calm day for us here where it wasn't snowing on that December 16th day, but it was not a snowy day either. It was just a waste of precipitation. That's just the way I see it. Just a waste of precipitation. Look, it's gone. Don't even have no pile of snow to look at. Not even a dirty black pile of snow. And it's interesting about the northwest winds. I'm going to touch on this for a little bit or northeast, excuse me, because I actually drew this on Twitter, like, I don't know, maybe right around the time of that storm. That northeast wind for Ocean County, Atlantic, Cape May, that is a sea breeze. So water temperatures in the 40s. Yeah, we're going to be in the 40s and rain. But once you get to and you could, maybe pinpoint it better for me. We'll say the Turnpike, basically, right? So you're talking like Middlesex County and places north. That northeast wind still a little bit there's still a land breeze. That's a land breeze for them. So you actually get that colder air from New England. And we always say the Turnpike's that great rain snow line. And, I don't know why the New Jersey DOT made life so much easier for us meteorologists out there, but it seems to always be, with reason that the rain snow line is around the Turnpike. And if you look at those northeast winds, west of the Turnpike, northeast winds are a land breeze. East of the Turnpike, it's usually a sea breeze.
Yeah, no, good point. And this one, you could even use east to west. You could use 195. So south of there wasn't too much until you got over to the Turnpike. Mm-hmm. And then west of the Turnpike, you had 4 or 5 inches of snow in Haddonfield and Camden area.
True.
North of there, Howell had 4 or 5 inches, but down towards Wall, there was a little less, and further down. Right. So, yeah, the roadway systems are great in the state. In the summer, it's the sea breeze that oftentimes you look east of the Garden State Parkway.
Yep.
Route 78's a big one in central Jersey, Route 80 in North Jersey, because there you're adding both latitude and elevation and distance away from the ocean.
Yeah, and not to pin this on you, but you say Route 78's the dividing line of North and Central Jersey?
Well, you have to take my Jersey geography course this coming semester to discuss that.
Okay. I'm just curious, because I would agree with you. I agree with you. But some people I'm looking at in this newsroom right now, do not agree with that sentiment.
No, it's 70. Yeah. North of 78, little north of 78. You'd start basically saying North Jersey. By the time you're Route 80, you're in North Jersey.
Oh, yeah. You're way up there at that point.
And by, maybe 195, you could still be the lower end of Central Jersey.
I'm with you 100%. Great minds think alike. This is why we have the same birthday.
That's right. That's exactly
May 13th.
Polluted
right.
minds.
Exactly. All right.
Again, the roadways are useful for determining where these conditions occur. But you see that everywhere. I remember up in New York, they talk about north of 287 in Westchester County. There's a big difference than down in White Plains and Yonkers, or when you get up into northern Rockland County or Orange County in Route 17 or places on the thruway. Right. It's just very useful geographic markers because people understand it. And that's the whole thing that you're doing, and I try to do as well, is communicate with people so they'll understand the situation better.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get off the roadway topic. We'll go back into the weather for the month. Just kind of wrap up where we were with precipitation. So, we talked about the snow a little bit, but, when you factor in that rain, were we wetter than usual? Were we drier than usual? And put it in perspective for us.
No, we were wetter than usual. With over 5 inches of rain, about 1.5 inches above normal of rain and melted snow, if there was snow in your area. Not excessively so. The ranks, wherever you were in the state or the state as a whole, was about 20 to 25th wettest of the last 126 years. So the top 20% just cracked that. So wet, but not unusually so.
Right. Okay, gotcha. And, when we look at other storms during the month, you mentioned the Christmas Eve storm. I do want to talk about that because that was it was a windy Christmas Eve night. And I still don't know, is that what you call it, Christmas Eve night? Like I would say Christmas evening, but you can't say Christmas evening because you have Christmas Eve.
It's Christmas Eve.
It's Christmas Eve. All right, whatever. So we had strong winds. We actually had some power outages in South Jersey. A couple thousand customers, Atlantic State Electric customers, were without power. Highest wind gust was 68 in Mystic Islands, but even 61 at Atlantic State International Airport. And that's an EHT, inland, a couple miles inland here. So wind was all around. What can you tell us about that storm?
Oh, that was a nasty storm. Now that storm went off to our west some.
Yes.
So it had a different track. It was not your classic nor'easter, even close to what the previous one was. And with that, it brought southerly winds with the counterclockwise rotation around that low. As the storm went to our west, it brought up the warm air. And that's why there was no snow to be found. And temperatures got into the 50s, even up at high point, and in the mid 60s. Literally, as Santa was coming through early in the morning, the high temperatures hit the low to mid 60s in a lot of New Jersey about 2 or 3 in the morning, Christmas morning. Mm-hmm. So it was a different beast in that regard, tracking to our west. That gave us the stronger winds, and the heaviest precipitation from that fell out in eastern Pennsylvania, particularly the southern foothills of the Poconos, as that moisture hit there, which was a real mess because they had so much snow from the storm on the 16th and 17th. Not the worst of that snow fell up near Binghamton, further north, but you had snow melt and a couple of inches of rain. So that was the storm that brought some river flooding in New Jersey, as well as even more so in eastern Pennsylvania.
Right. And as we were looking throughout the month, there's something that, in the weather world we'll talk about, the North Atlantic Oscillation, the Arctic Oscillation. I know a lot of our snow weenies out there know about them because they're looking for typically a negative North Atlantic Oscillation, a negative Arctic Oscillation. It has to do with the pressures, high and low pressure, where they are and how it interacts. So I won't get into the details, but throughout the month of December, the Arctic Oscillation was negative most of the time. The North Atlantic Oscillation was kind of flipping back and forth, but, it went from negative to positive on that December 24th storm. And just through the way I've seen things through weather, usually we get that negative to positive flip is when you can get some storms rolling through. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but, as we went throughout the month, we were fairly wet, fairly stormy. And those were the conditions we had with our oscillations.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a good lesson that these are just guides generally. They're not locked in because the Pacific played a big role, what was coming across the country from the Pacific.
Yep.
And sometimes those signals can overwhelm what's happening in the North Atlantic. And you can't get the coldest feed down into this area. Yeah. So you had to look at multiple locations this month. It wasn't your classic negative North Atlantic Oscillation, which drops the jet stream to our south in the eastern U.S., which allows cold air to pour in from Canada and spawn storms on the upward swing of that trough of low pressure as the jet digs into the eastern U.S. And, that's what, snow lovers dream about.
Yes. I dream about that. I dreamed about that last night. That jet stream coming like right off the Carolina coast, coming up, right up the coast. You get that storm track. It goes over the benchmark, 40 degrees north latitude, 70 degrees west.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although in our corner of the state, we should be a little bit further east at 70 degrees west, but that's getting in the weeds. But
good point. No, I mean, so these are guides and they're useful. Don't get me wrong. And they are meaningful. But they can get overwhelmed by other signals sometimes, mixed with other signals. They just don't play out. I mean, there's a lot of talk right now about the NAO going negative, a Greenland block setting up later this month, stratospheric warming translating down to the surface, which would spawn a very wavy jet stream. But it still doesn't say where that jet will dip over North America or Europe. And it doesn't say whether it's going to be able to tap cross-polar Siberian air mass down here into North America. Right now, all those parts are not together to suggest that this is a lock that's going to get cold and snowy later in the month. But there are some indicators there that suggest it could.
You heard it here first, snow lovers. Maybe.
Which we
But
didn't see last winter, all
No,
I'll say.
no,
We
we did
didn't
not.
see that pattern until April.
Yes.
And April and May were the only below normal months of the year. And we had snow on May 9th. All you needed to do is take that pattern and shift it to January and February, and we'd still be talking about last winter.
I'll just
Instead of
remember
complaining there was no snow.
Yeah, I'll just think back to the blizzard of 2010 because that one was my favorite. All right, well, we're going to cap off this first half with that, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about temperatures, and we'll talk about some other things going on in the weather world. You're listening to Something in the Air podcast. All right, everybody, we are back. Something in the Air podcast, December monthly roundup. Join with me as we do at the top of every month, New Jersey State Climatologist, Dr. Dave Robinson.
Good to be here. It's good to be here.
Sorry, I should have just rolled right into it. I was going to open up the floor to you a little bit.
Everybody listens to this knows we enjoy talking about the weather and talking to each other about the weather.
Exactly. All right.
And climate.
And climate. Yes. And climate. Let's talk about, we definitely going to talk about some climate at the end, but let's talk about what happened this past month and comparing it to climate. We'll look at our temperatures. We were above average this past month, which really is not a big surprise for us here, but at Atlantic City International Airport, we were 1.4 degrees above the climatological average. AC Marina wound up 2 degrees above the climatological average. So those are only just 2 points in South Jersey. When you average everything together, I'm going to imagine we were still above average.
Yeah, we were about 2 degrees. It's for South Jersey, 1.9 above average. And much like the precip, we ranked in the 20s, 21st. Mm-hmm. So they both were something you only see once every 5 years or so, but not highly unusual, like many of the months of warmth we saw in 2020. So above average.
Yeah, and those temperatures were fairly split evenly between the amount above average for the highs and for the lows. Earlier in the year, we kind of hammered on this a little bit. It was the low temperatures that were really driving the warmth, but not really this much that I found during December. It was pretty evenly split between the daytime highs and the overnight lows.
Yeah, and that followed in November where the daytime highs were more unusual.
Sure. And we had that beach weather that first weekend of November down here.
Yeah. And statewide, the departures were about 2 degrees. So, again, the beat goes on. It was 10 out of the 12 months of 2020 had above normal temperatures.
Mm-hmm. And, just looking at the month, nothing really stood out to me as anything super warm or super cold. We had some warmer days. Christmas Eve, we talked about, we did get into Christmas Day. That was probably the extent of it here. So just let me ask you, what drove this, warmer, but I'm not going to say anything exceptional of a pattern here, just this overall humming warmth, I'll call it.
Well, it's just been this persistent warmth that we're seeing, that when we're under a warm air mass, it's warmer than it used to be. When we're within a cold air mass, it's generally warmer than it used to be. We still get cold days and warm days. After the snow event, Walpack on a snowy, deep snow cover, they got to 6 below on December 19th. And there were single digits. The coldest temperatures of 2020 were on December 19th. They surpassed anything from last January or February. Snow helped there. So North Jersey felt it more than the South.
Right.
So it's just this ongoing pattern. There is undeniably New Jersey is getting warmer decade by decade.
Yeah.
And it's quite apparent that human activities are behind this, but it's not every day, every month, or I hesitate to say every year because every year is warm, but it doesn't mean one year is necessarily warmer than the next. Right now, 2012 was our warmest year. Number 2 is 2020.
Yeah.
2021, my guess is it's not going to be as warm as 2020 because we're having this La Nina event, particularly on a global basis. And La Nina events tend to result in a somewhat cooler atmosphere. But even these cooler La Nina atmospheres now are warmer than they've ever been.
Right.
So
Right.
There we are.
You're
Ongoing
shifting
warmth.
Yeah, you're kind of shifting the likelihoods of things. So, what might have been a 20% chance of being below average 50 years ago is now a 10% chance. It can still happen, but it's not happening as often, or you can't count on it as often. And one thing where we're going to notice this switch is our new climate averages will be coming out this year.
Good segue.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So usually when we say above or below average, we're comparing it to what is now 1981 to 2010, so 30-year average. Well, now we've gone through the 2010s, and now we have some new averages to calculate from 1991 to 2020, which I was born in 91. So this is like all of my life in one average. This is quite incredible. I'm very happy for this. But
it's my entire career as state climatologist.
See, that works out. Works perfectly. See, going back to the birthday thing, it all works out. So we are going to have an increase with this. So from what I saw from Brian Bretschneider, who's a climatologist in Alaska, he was calculating various points. We're going to go up anywhere between 0 to 0.5 degrees Celsius with our increase in the averages. It might not sound like a lot, but we went up last decade and we went up the previous decade. It adds up. And yeah, you might not see for the first couple of years that we're not going to be as above average as before, but if current trends continue, we'll kind of end up where we have been in 2019 and 20, where we're getting a lot more days above average. You want to add to that? And do you have any role in that?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
We'll be evaluating some. We've looked at some of these ourselves in the state climate office, but we're going to wait for the National Centers for Environmental Information are busy at work on this.
Okay.
Truth be told, one of my closest friends is in charge of the program down there, so I do get the inside skinny a little bit.
Oh, and are you breaking news here then? We're going to break some news today?
No, but I would recommend that people, if they have a link to Forbes magazine, just 3 days ago, Dr. Marshall Shepard, who's another good friend, who's a professor at University of Georgia and former president of the American Meteorological Society. Marshall writes a column for Forbes, and an email arrived the other morning. Dave, what do you think about these normals? What's the impact's going to be? And he wrote myself and the Delaware State Climatologist and someone at the University of Georgia, a colleague. I think it was Saturday. We were all back to him by 9 a.m. And we recommended this individual from NCEI who subsequently responded. And Marsh, so if you look, it really explains why we have these 30-year means. And Mike Pilecki, who's running this from NCEI, Dr. Pilecki, he said that they're hoping to release them by May.
Okay.
Which is really fast compared to what was in the past.
What was it last
30-year means, they're going to look at 15-year means, but they have to wait for the data to still come in, because some's still coming in. Then they have to process it into their software system. Then they have to do quality control, quality assurance look at these. Then they can start putting it into final products and release it. So it may sound like 5 months in, that's a lot. This is really quick order. And they've been planning on this for the last couple of years to be able to spin up. And at first we'll see temperature and precipitation normals. But there's a lot of work behind it that people don't see. So stay tuned. A lot of people are out there now and they've calculated their own. And yes, it's getting warmer. We've run ours for snow. For New Jersey.
Where are we going to be?
When you take away the 80s snow and you bring in the last decade of snow, because what you're doing for this 30-year mean, you're getting rid of one decade and you're adding another. New Jersey gets snowier. This last decade was a snowier decade than the decade of the 80s.
Well, I don't remember the 80s too well, but I do remember the 2010s very well. And there was a lot of big snowstorms during the 2010s. In fact, I remember Paul Cosin, more famously known on the Weather Channel, though he's written many, different pieces and everything. He did a talk. I remember this. Oh God, I think it was in Atlantic City even, about how we're living in the good old days for snow. This was back in like 2014, especially, for the mid-Atlantic, because the 2010 storm, it was like year after year that we're getting these large snowstorms. And even the winter of 2014 to 15 was another busy year as well. And, we're not going to see that all the time, but because of those big storms, it's pulling up the average.
Yeah, there's no question. We've had feast or famine, if you will, in the last decade or so. Really rich years and other paltry years. There's no rhyme or reason to that. We're looking into that a little bit. I'm working with a student, an intern, on to look a little closer at that. But clearly, we've gotten a little snowy, but we're going to be considerably warmer. So, as you said, and I suggested, and it was quoted in this Forbes article, we might want to choose a standard period of time and just keep it fixed, and compare everything to that period of time, because right now it's not going to be as impressive. Right. And it could be deceptive in the next decade or two that, it's not warming as much because we don't have as many above normal days. Well, we don't have as many above normal days because we're comparing it to a warmer period than we used to.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not the only one to suggest this, but 51 to 80, that 30-year period, there were a lot of stations available. They were all digitized. Mm-hmm. It was before we had this human signal of warming confidently emerge from the natural noisy climate system. Up until the 70s, it was hard to tell. But once you got into the 80s, boy, there was a big difference between the natural and the human-induced signal. Right. So that would give you this baseline to look at, and you just keep it fixed and compare everything to that, and then you'll be able to see the warmth. Now, one criticism could be a lot of people around now weren't in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Like us.
Another question to ask is, it has to do with the data availability at that time, and why you do 30 years. Why don't we do 50 years? Why don't we do 100 years? Well, 100, no one was around to speak of back then, but 30 years is considered a long enough period of time to come up with an average and getting rid of some of the variability, so it smooths it out a little bit. And it's also a short enough period that there are a lot of stations available. If you go back beyond that, there weren't as many stations or a lot of availability. And this is set not only nationally, but it's set internationally. Mm-hmm. So 30 years, because it's long enough to get an average. Recent 30-year increments, because there's enough data available to do the calculations. But is it perfect? No, there are all other average periods. And many will say that about a 15-year average is the best average to use to predict what next year is going to be, not the last 30 years. It's called an optimal climate normal. And that's what the long-range forecast community down at the NOAA's Climate Weather Prediction Center uses, these 15. Optimal climate normals.
Okay. All right.
And those 15-year means will be produced as part of this 91 to 2020 analysis of 15-year means and 30-year means.
Got it. So when we're doing these updates for the next couple of months, we're still going to be comparing to the old one. But at some point, we will flip the switch and we will make our way over to 91 and 2010.
And we'll talk, and we will talk about that, because we'll be looking at it, probably writing up something for posting. And we can certainly talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we will. I think we'll be talking plenty this year. All right. Well, we ran out of time because we had a really good conversation about these averages. I wanted to get to them. There were some other things we could have gotten to, but that's okay. We always have next month. We can always talk about it again. Right. Dr. Robinson, tell us where we can get New Jersey climate information.
njclimate.org for your climate information, and for your short-term 5-minute daily weather information, njweather.org.
All right. Well,
they interlink.
Yes, they do. If you go to one, you'll definitely be able to find the other, no problem.
Correct.
All right. So we're going to wrap it up for this episode of Something in the Air podcast, our first one of 2021. We will be back with you on January was it January 20th? That's the third Wednesday of the month. We're going to have a special guest for you. That is still to be announced right now, but we have a couple of ideas cooking. So we'll see you on the 20th. And until then, stay safe. Take care, everybody.